It's a difficult, possibly even tedious task to distill the works of a director like Martin Scorsese into a 10-minute or so video essay. But if there is one place we could begin to look, it might be one of the most obvious places, his gangster movies. Scorsese's career is one that spans decades. Just to give some impression of the breadth of his work and experience, consider that he worked at NYU during the 60s and 70s and was a teacher of none other than Oliver Stone and Spike Lee. And yet Scorsese is still at the top of his game, having just been nominated for the Oscars this year in 2024. Scorsese's career took off with films like Mean Streets and Taxi Driver, having started out with the same crew of actors, Robert De Niro and Harvey Keitel. Scorsese began to direct movies that were more studio-centric, although he has amassed a huge volume of work including music videos, documentaries, TV and studio feature films spanning a wide variety of genres. The gangster movie, having been a staple of his canon, is not entirely surprising. Scorsese grew up in New York's Little Italy district and would have been immersed in the folklore of those neighbourhoods. Such lore would have definitely lent itself to the stories that he would subsequently go on to tell. The director himself is an enigma of sorts. He is outspoken and forthcoming on the topic of cinematic discourse, but aside from that, do we really know him? His public persona is a sort of American everyman, a boy done good from an immigrant community, a towering intellect and perhaps a poster boy for a golden age in cinema. When Scorsese did become imminent, Hollywood was undergoing a renaissance. He befriended a group of emerging auteurs flippantly referred to as the movie brats, namely Francis Ford Coppola, Paul Schrader, Brian De Palma, George Lucas, John Milius, and even Steven Spielberg. They collaborated, innovated, and influenced one another. In some sense, they became the industry. In Scorsese's canon, the most famous titles that spring to mind are Goodfellas, Casino, The Departed, The Irishman, and Mean Streets. The latter captured the public's imagination, was a critical darling, albeit a box office flop, but included star-making turns from the likes of De Niro and Harvey Keitel. The genre itself is rather interesting and unique, containing very specific themes and motifs that we are all familiar with, having watched the canon of gangster movie tropes over the last 50 years or so. Scorsese himself, having turned 82, recently lamented in an interview that he is only now beginning to see the possibility of what cinema could be, and it's too late. While this may hit hard, a film buff's consolation may be that if you want an entire film school in one director's body of work, look no further. Scorsese typically loves to explore themes like loyalty juxtaposed with betrayal, family juxtaposed with societal pressures, and the loss of one's soul in the pursuit of the American dream. We see this with many of his characters. They are young and impetuous and anxious to prove themselves in a world where dog eats dog, as they seek to prove their ruthlessness and eventually suffer the inevitable consequences. While we see some of the characters become lost in the pursuit of the American dream, we also see characters betray one another in the pursuit of self-preservation and survival. This is especially evident in Goodfellas, where Henry Hill is prepared to hang all of his friends and confidants in order to save his own family. This is also depicted in an exaggerated form in The Departed, where loyalties are constantly tested and flipped over. Few other directors have pioneered the depiction of violence as a storytelling device. Scorsese's name is, for better or worse, synonymous with it. To paraphrase Oscar Wilde, art has no moral responsibility, and thus it is so with Scorsese's violent renderings that seeks neither to preach nor judge. They merely are a witness, a mirror, and at their most obvious, a help in understanding and making sense of the society that we live in today. As far as his storytelling devices go, he employs a number of signature devices when blocking through a scene within his films. You will know you're watching a Scorsese film if you see a perpetually moving camera, jump cuts to inserts, urgent zooms, and an elaborate use of mise-en-scène that allows the audience to walk through various scenes and witness everyday life from the point of view of the characters. Besides the well thought out and choreographed blocking, Scorsese is a master of editing. His first foray into film after college was, after all, to serve as an editor. Thelma Schoonmaker has been chief among his editors over a period of decades. Now at this stage, she, along with Scorsese, have coalesced a certain format while editing stories, which is sometimes erratic and more often compelling, and pulls the audience straight into the action or pushes them back in order to witness the wider narrative. Of course, Scorsese has oft quoted the old adage that casting is 90% of directing. Coupled with his brilliantly chosen and resolved screenplays are a host of regular collaborators who act under Scorsese's direction, most notably Robert De Niro and Leonardo DiCaprio. Their on-screen offerings are legendary at this stage and have produced movies that many will agree are modern classics. Scorsese himself has a unique relationship with the actors that he chooses when casting. He has a profound insight into the character's psyche and possesses a language of visual storytelling that he effortlessly conveys to his actors. Another important component of his storytelling is music. Scorsese has often been of the mind to allow the classic hits of a given time period to be the soundtrack and the score of his movies. You can hear this in movies like Goodfellas. There is virtually no dedicated movie score by a composer involved. He has, though, more recently employed old collaborator Robbie Robertson as music composer in his films, particularly The Irishman and Killers of the Flower Moon. He had also previously employed Peter Gabriel to score The Last Temptation of Christ. But these are the exception and not the rule. There are classic scenes in films like Goodfellas, using Eric Clapton's Layla outro and various crooner classics from the 1960s and even 50s to put the audience within the time frame of the story itself. Perhaps the most vital component to Scorsese's direction is his cinematography. Robert Richardson, Rodrigo Prieto and Michael Ballhaus are all responsible for keying in these signature motifs in Scorsese's cinematographic vision. For example, wide shots are beautifully composed, depicting the situation from a distance. This might include a murder or a fracas of some sort between the antagonist and protagonist, or a public gathering. As I mentioned earlier, some of Scorsese's favourite storytelling devices within cinematography are swift zooms, slow motion tracking shots and freeze frames. The lighting is very often desaturated, the colour palette containing many muted hues, mainly browns and blacks, with some lighter colours such as off-whites for contrast. For all the stylized violence contained within Scorsese's visual language, if we look at what each character really wants, what their arc is, what drives them, it is usually a sense of striving for more. They tend to punch above their weight. They tend to have notions above their station. They are often driven by a sense of injustice or disadvantage that motivates them to great success. Of course, there is almost invariably and inevitably a downfall, usually in stark contrast to their meteoric rise. Scorsese then is interested more in building characters up in order to watch them fall, and in some ways this encapsulates the human spirit when we strive, but it is motivated by hubris. It is also evident in some genres that he has explored outside the gangster trope. For example, Cape Fear and Taxi Driver. He takes the model of the hard-done-by everyman and pits him against societal wrongs and injustice. There is within these horrible characters, though, an attempt that we can all identify with to rail against injustice. The violence, being an ever-present shadow in Scorsese's gangster films, becomes inseparable from the pursuit of the American dream. Characters resort to brutality in order to secure their positions and protect their interests, leading to a cycle of retribution and destruction. The consequences of violent actions then permeate both the characters' lives and the society they inhabit. Amidst the corruption and chaos, some characters seek redemption and reflect on their choices. Scorsese explores the emotional and psychological consequences of a life spent chasing the American dream. The quest for redemption becomes a poignant counterpoint to the relentless pursuit of success, adding depth and nuance to the characters. In conclusion, in Martin Scorsese's gangster films, the American dream emerges as a complex and elusive concept, tainted by the corruption that seeps into the pursuit of success. Through the lens of organised crime, Scorsese weaves narratives that unravel the intricacies of ambition, morality, and the consequences of a corrupted dream. His films serve as a compelling commentary on the fragility of the American dream, challenging conventional notions of success and prosperity. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a like and subscribe. Hit the bell icon for notifications. Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and I'll see you in the next one.